Hey everybody, it's Commander Clyde. Welcome back to the Smite solo line guide. Today we're going to be talking about matchups and synergy. Starting off at my solo lane tier list page, because this is the best way for me to talk about this. This is, by the way, this is not a tier list video, even though it's what we're looking at. We're going to look at the gods, and we're going to talk about their matchups. So basically, when you want to pick what situations you want to pick what god, starting with the obvious top solo laner, King Arthur. Obviously, if he's there and you're in solo, you would ideally want to pick him if he's available to you. Now, if you find yourself facing an Arthur and his millions of abilities, you've got a few options. Obviously, Tyr, Yorm, and Osiris are going to be your top picks against a King Arthur. Tyr kind of works in similar ways. He's got a lot of abilities, uses Glide Shield really well, high sustain, high pressure, all those fun things that make solo laners so great. Makes him an ideal pick against King Arthur. Yorm is good because he counters his knockup and his combo stance ult, which are both very frustrating abilities. Also, the best thing at Yorm, he gets a lot of wave pressure. He can clear waves really quick. He gets a lot of totem pressure because of his one. You can throw it down on the totem and just leave it there and then come back to it later to finish it. And his ult is very safe and very useful for avoiding damage if need be. And then Osiris is just a really good boxer, high sustain god, very strong bully, which makes him good against King Arthur, especially when he doesn't have abilities up to spam. Osiris can just keep on swinging. Makes him really effective there. Could also go for the Thor. We saw him a lot at the Smite World Championship. People really like this god. He's got high crowd control, which is what makes him a desirable pick against really any god. And because of that, he can also be fairly safe. He's not the safest god, but he's got enough safety that Arthur's not going to give him too many fits if he's careful. And then Achilles is good. We saw him a lot at SWC too. He's going to be good because he's got a lot of sustain. His one, if used properly, can also interrupt King Arthur's 3, which is pretty good for when you're trying to box. And then Guan Yu can be good because he's got some built-in sustain. His 3, which is his main wave clear, is knockup immune, and so King Arthur doesn't really have a way to interrupt that very well. And if you're in trouble, just use your 2 and you're out of danger. The ult's also pretty useful against King Arthur because he can't really get away from it since he doesn't have a jump. And there's that. So what if you're fighting Tyr though? Again, King Arthur is here, but we're assuming you don't have him available. In which case, Yorm, Osiris are obviously going to be your top 2 that you want. Thor is there. Humbots can have more usability here because Tyr has fewer abilities than King Arthur. And he's a little bit easier to manipulate, especially if he's tower diving you with Humbots, so there that is. And then Achilles and Guan Yu, for similar reasons, you would pick them against King Arthur. Guan Yu is actually even better against Tyr because he can avoid the majority of Tyr's damage with his 3 and his 2. So obviously the 3 is going to make you completely immune to the Fearless. Well, not, I mean, you'll still take damage, but the knockup will not work. And then you can, if the 2 is timed properly, you can just go right through him and he'll completely miss his Fearless. That too, which makes him a really good counter pick against Tyr. And then Bellona's got some usability here because when Tyr's abilities are down, she's going to have the advantage. Since she's auto attack based, especially if Scourge is there, gonna be easy. A little bit easier to deal with. Which brings us to Jormungandr. Again, all these gods up. These 3 other of the top 4 are gonna be good picks. Thor is good here. Achilles is gonna be decent here. I'd avoid Guan here. That's really not going to be as helpful. Some other gods. And then Bellona, Auto Attack Warrior. That's always a good bet against the Yorm. If you're trying to survive in the lane. And finally, and then Osiris matchups. This is a bit tougher. Osiris is actually really hard to counter. In fact, there's not really a counter pick to him. Which, it's funny that the god that's 4th best actually is the hardest one to fight properly. I mean, these are ahead of him because they're just such beastly gods in the solo lane that they're gonna win pretty much any situation. Osiris is the constant. As it were, there's not really good picks into him except the gods that are better than he is. And then Cullen, a lot of you may be asking why he's here. It's because he has a lot of he counters several gods pretty well. So almost all the gods in S tier he's going to be a good pick against. And that's why he's up here, even though he's not as good as these gods. And doesn't have as many winning matchups. He counters a very important component of the solo lane, and that is sustain. Since his 1 has built-in 50% anti-heal, he's going to be a good pick against Achilles, Guan, Robin, Chak, Ardeo, Hercules, Amaterasu, and Kama, Thanatos, Chang'ad, this god, you know, he just beats a lot of gods freely because he counters their healing. And Thor and Humbots are kind of the same here. I have them up here because they are the best non-traditional solo laners. So they're not a guardian or a warrior. They don't have the tankiness or the sustain qualities, but they are the best options that do not have those qualities, and in fact can win certain matchups in the solo lane. So that's why they sit up here. Like, they have good matchups against most of these gods here, except like Robin and Chak. They're not really going to have good matchups against those 2, but that's because they're just specifically very good at fighting assassins. Of course, Robin is an assassin now, but they're good at fighting. He's good at fighting other assassins, and then Chak is like the ultimate anti-assassin god. Achilles is going to be a solid pick most of the time, because he's going to beat most of the other gods in this tier, and he's going to be able to hold his own against gods up here. He's very good at boxing, typically, so there he is. Guan is almost exclusively a counter pick god. You pick him if you're fighting a god that he fits well into, otherwise you're probably avoiding him. Then Bellona's Bellona. She's a solid pick most of the time because she's an auto attack warrior with good ability damage. Good pressure god. So there's that. Robin's good at boxing because of his passive. He's got decent sustain. His wave clear can be a little awkward since he's probably not, if he's not able to group the minions, he's going to have to hit the archers and the melees with his one with separate casts, which is a little awkward and annoying, but he's good against a lot of gods. He's actually decent against Osiris because he's got the root, the slow, he's got the 2 to immune Robin's, he's got the 2 to immune Osiris's 3 if he needs it, and then the ult to counter ult with, which also gives him damage reduction, which is very good, of course. Then Chalk is a very average lane maintenance character. He's a god you want to pick if you just don't want to lose the lane and you're not sure what else to do. There he is. He's also good against these 2 gods up here, like I said. But yeah, very boring, average lane maintenance god. He's not going to lose the lane. His rotations also are not usually very valuable because the longer he's away from the solo lane, the worse it typically is for him. Unless you're just playing cleanup crew in the mid lane after somebody was brought to low health but not killed, you can just come around the back and ult them. Then RDO is a good solo lane guardian because of high sustain, high pressure. She clears the lane fairly well, but her main strength is her sustain, obviously. If you're fighting guys that don't really have anti-heal and are also given trouble by cripples, so she's a good pick into that situation. Hercules is kind of his own thing. He wins a lot of matchups. He's a very strong god, typically, but he's easy to outbox for the gods up here, typically. And then a lot of gods can sort of have ways to control him. Ardio's got the cripple, Chalk has a big slow, and then Achilles kind of just outboxes him. And Sun Wukong, just again lane maintenance type of god. He's a little bit more mobile, so he can do more things than Chalk, but he doesn't really win a lot of matchups. So there he is. And then, you know, Amaterasu, I don't really like her very much. She has a lot of losing matchups in solo. I would avoid picking her most of the time. I know people like the whole lose lane, win the game idea. I don't feel that really applies well in the solo lane because solo laners in this meta do not determine the outcome of games. Plain and simple. Nike's a situational god. For gods that aren't mobile. She also gets good lane pressure. She's fairly safe because of her leap and her ultimate. And that's it. She's kind of just a safe character. And since most of her damage is on one ability, it's not going to be that great against most gods above her. And then Chen is a great solo lane guardian, functions more like a warrior, high sustain and all that. Typically good lane management. He gets a lot for his rotations typically because he's a good setup god as it is. So he's good for the team fights and things like that. Susanoo, a high mobility god. If you're fighting gods that don't have a lot of sustain or have a lot of really annoying abilities and can chase you, this is a good god to pick because he's typically more mobile than anything else. Very tough to gank because of that usually, unless you bait him out of position. Camazotz and Thanatos are like the same god because they both sustain really well and have high ability damage, good against guardians because they'll out-sustain and out-damage them usually. But being assassins, they're kind of limited in what they can do and they'll get beaten by most warriors. Chang'e Good lane maintenance character. She will lose if she's behind, though. And this god, who we shall not speak her name, is just a really good pick and can play a lot of different roles. That's why she's there, even though she's not really a typical solo laner. Hell is a god, pick it if you're good with her, and you can land your abilities. That way you'll get plenty of wave pressure and just general pressure. On towers, you can heal your waves and push them in, things like that, you know. She's good for that, but as soon as Hell gets behind, game over. She'll lose the lane. So that's your idea. If there's a Hell, you don't want to get behind if you're Hell. And if you're fighting one, obviously you've got a lot of gods, honestly. Her health pool is pretty low, and she is fairly easy to chase. Like Achilles is going to give her a really hard time. These gods are obviously ridiculous, but we knew that already. Cullen gives her a really hard time because of his anti-heal and the way his kit works. He's really good at chasing gods. Things like that. Sobek can be okay against Hell, but his problem is he might take too much damage. Not be as useful, but again, built-in anti-heal. Really annoying character. There's not a lot of matchups he does well in, but in certain situations against gods with a lot of sustain, or gods that aren't that great at boxing, Sobek's gonna be decent against. The Ymir's kind of similar. He's got better wave clear and better burst damage, but he'll fall off quite a bit after the early game until super late when he's actually useful for team fights. And Vamana's a weird character. He loses to a lot of average gods for some reason. He's just not very good right now. I would just, for the most part, avoid picking him. Except in gods he can abuse well, like Nike, solo lane guardians. A couple of the assassins he's pretty good against. His main counter matchup is Chalk, so if you see a Vamana, pick Chalk. That's really it. And that's part of the reason why he's all the way down here, because he loses to an incredibly average character. And then Cerberus is a pick it if you're good with him type of thing. I know Ro used this god in the Smite World Championship, but that's because Ro's been around a long time and he's very good with this character. It's the only reason it works. Otherwise, you can do some cheeky things and get wave pressure and damage your opponent at the same time if you group the wave correctly. His clear is also pretty safe because he just hits 2-1 and then he can just leave after that with his jump. He's pretty much fine. He's a good lane maintenance god from that respect. He's also difficult to gank because of his ultimate. We'll get more into that later. Odin is a terrible god typically because all of his damage is also his clear on the wave. Makes him very tough to deal with because he's literally jump on the wave and then you have to leave because you don't win anything after that because he'll get outboxed by pretty much everything. Especially since they'll have their abilities up before him and they'll also be abilities that are easier to hit. Odin, it's literally you just walk a different direction when he jumps and he'll probably miss because it's so slow. And then Loki is a weird only if you're good type of god do you pick him most of the time because warriors can clear more efficiently than he can usually and take less damage from him. They kind of just can steamroll him with pressure. Like if you just proxy him constantly, he has to sit there in the lane and do nothing except try to farm. And then of course if you just have your jungler go to his blue all the time and you both gank him, like, he kind of just loses. He's very easy to pressure to death. Then Aphro's on the bottom because all she kind of does is clear the wave and then leaves. She's not going to be able to outbox you in the lane. She's not really going to be able to invade buffs. She's just going to sit there and try to farm and not die. And that's all she's able to do. And then hunters, but I don't consider hunters solo laners, so I'm not talking about them at all. And I would highly discourage everyone from picking a hunter in solo. They're too easy to gank, and they're too... I mean, it's just like, they just take too much damage, and they're not safe enough, and they typically don't have enough sustain to survive. Alright, anyway, so of course we talked about matchups here in what situations you want to pick these gods, but we haven't talked about team synergy yet. So as a solo laner, team synergy is not necessarily that important, but it can be helpful, especially if you're building your comp that way, to have a lot of team synergy. Now, obviously these gods up here are just good as they are, and it doesn't matter how good or bad they are at team fighting. They're just that good. Yorm is incredibly disruptive if he uses his ult in team fights, but that's really the only way he's typically really great in team fights, unless he's using his acid pools to zone, things like that. But and then Tyr and King Arthur can pick off single targets really easily, so that makes up for their lack of team fighting. And then Osiris is just an annoying bully in your face all the time. That makes him good. So getting more specific, Cullen's not so great. His team synergy's kind of bad. He's very much, I go after a single target god, except he's not that efficient at doing that as compared to King Arthur and Tyr, since they can CC chain you, and then their ultimates are good chase tools if the carry jumps away or something like that. Cullen's not so great at chasing like that, so not a great team synergy god. And then Thor and Humbot's obviously great synergy gods because their ultimates can lock down and pick off a single target for the team to pick off, so they're very good team synergy based gods. If your team comp needs a little help in the late game, they're good. Achilles is good at chasing single targets too. I mean, most solo laners are good at chasing a single target usually. Achilles is incredibly annoying. What can make him good is that execute, because if he's in around a team fight, that execute threat is just there all the time, whether or not he's actually being that helpful in the team fight. If the rest of your team can get somebody low and he's there, he can execute them easily. Guan's ult is good in team fights because it's CC immune and it's mobile, and he can stun multiple targets at once, so that's really great. Bellona is very much a single target fighting god and does not have good team fight synergy, so if your team's dependent on that, avoid that. Robin, kind of the same way. Chalk is a weird god from the respect of he's very annoying. He can pick a single target, but your team will have to kill them because he can't do it himself. It's one of his deficiencies as a solo laner. His kit can't actually wipe out a carry. He's just there for being really annoying and zoning the team off, which is important for fire giants and things like that, so his objective control is very excellent. And if you're concerned about that and you need your team to have more objective control, there it is. RDO doesn't have good team fight because her cripple is pretty small, and so is her stun radius, so she doesn't get much use out of that. She can be very annoying and zone off single targets and can also lock them down pretty well, but again, she needs the team. to finish anybody off. Hercules has pretty bad team fight because he's very much, I grab a single target and I pin them against a wall. That's what he does. Unless he's throwing the boulder at an objective, he's not very useful outside of that in terms of team fighting and team synergy. Which, of course, being able to steal a fire giant safely is a good thing to have. But outside of that, he doesn't have much. Sun Wukong can pick a single target, needs the team to finish him off. That's very hard. He's got one ability to pick a single target, and if he misses it, then he doesn't do anything. So that makes him kind of rough. He can be good at stealing objectives because he can go up in his ult, like behind fire, and then leap onto the fire giant. Take it, and if you're quick, you can get your ox or your eagle form of your 3 off and get out. That's gonna be tough. That's the only time he's really useful. Amma has good team fight synergy because she can hit multiple targets with her stun, and she's also very good at chasing single targets. Very good type of god here. Like, he's got the big team fight ultimate. She's got pretty good team fight synergy because of that. It's just a big AoE slow, but hey, sometimes in a team fight that's enough to help your team out. So she's pretty helpful. And she's actually better than some of these guys up here at team fighting. That's one of her redeeming qualities. Then Jing is obviously a good team god. He's got an ability for lockdown. He can chase. He can grab multiple targets with his ultimate and put them in a place where it's better for your carries to get their damage off. Because obviously you're getting blink on him as your second relic, just so you can do things like that. I didn't mention that, but yes, typically on most solo laners you're also going blink as your second relic. King Arthur tier, you're getting blink. Achilles, you're getting blink. Hercules, you're getting blink. Camazotz, blink. You get the idea here. Blink is actually typically a very good relic on your solo laners because it lets them get to the backline immediately and do what they were born to do, which is kill your carry and then walk away without taking damage. Susanoo, right, blink on him too. His team fight's a little bit weird because he can grab a single target and do a lot of damage to them, but not much AoE there unless you charge your ultimate and you're firing it at multiple targets on purpose, which usually you're not. You're usually just using the ult for execute damage, just to kill a target immediately with it. So it's not always going to be used as a team fighting tool, but it can be used as a team fighting tool since it can knock up multiple targets at once. Camazotz has really bad team fighting. It's not great in a team comp that relies on synergy. He can get after a single target pretty well, but that's all he can do. He can also get peeled because he can't deal his full kit's damage particularly fast. I mean, he's got his 1, his 2, and his 3. The 1 and the 2 deal most of their damage right away, but the 3 has a little bit of time. It's about a second. He's up in the air, and then his ult, you have to hit all 3 swoops for most of the damage, and then that takes a little bit of time too. So he can fight single targets, but he's slow at killing them, so not very useful there. Thanatos can very much hit a single target and kill them immediately, but he has to do that without being CC'd out of it, which is very hard, especially if you're in solo lane with him and you're probably not getting beads unless you're just not getting teleport, which I don't recommend skipping teleport. So that's a little rough for him. Chang'e's good at team fighting because she can heal the team. Good synergy there. She can hit multiple targets with her stun if you've got good aim. And she can be a very annoying zoning god as well. So that makes her a better pick than some of the gods down here. And then this god down here, the goddess of magic, has a massive circle ultimate that does damage and also heals your teammates. Her 2 has a big stun on it. Pick a single target so your team can do the damage. Got a silence too with a shield. And then the 1 is just annoying. Does damage. Very annoying god. She's just so good though that she's going to have synergy in any co-op. So hell can heal your team. Yep. That's about it. She also cleanse. That's the only thing she's useful for team synergy. Her damage doesn't really help her because her 1 is pretty much a single target ability and her 3 is a close range AoE, which makes it kind of hard because you have to go in and then hit your opponents. But the problem with going in is you're probably the main healer on your team, and if you die, your team's in trouble. So it's a weird catch-22 that makes it not a great choice. Sobek is good team fighting, big AoE slow. On the ult, does damage. He can grab a single target for your team to finish off. He's got anti-heal, which is good in long fights. Tail whip, again, that's good for knocking up targets so your carries can get their damage. You can also set up your pull. So you hit the tail whip, they can't move, and then you hit the 1, pull them back, done. There you go. Good team fight synergy, but most Guardians have good team fighting. Ymir is more of a single target Guardian. We're coming back to him now. His main strength is his late game ability to blink freeze. That is his main important quality, and that would be why you would pick him if you need another god that can blink in, CC a target so your team can come in and finish him off. The wall's also good for cutting off escape routes, obviously, keeping your opponents pinned in so you can get more freezes off, more ultimates, and all that fun stuff. Bellona has some of the worst team fighting in the game because his main damage is on his ultimate, which means you're going to have to ult, but that is not very good at hitting multiple targets, and you also have to chase them for quite a bit of time, which means you're more vulnerable to damage for that amount of time. Blah, blah, blah. Unless you can isolate a carry, you're not going to be able to kill anything with most of his kit without using his ult, and that's kind of a problem. Cerberus, like Ymir, falls off after the early and has great late game team fighting because blink in, hit the big ultimate, pull the targets, carries, get the damage, you win the team fight. There you go. And that's what Cerberus does very well. Odin's got the ring, late game for team fighting. His only redeeming quality of why you might even want to consider picking this god, don't though, because he's bad. Loki has the worst team fighting in the game out of any solo lane option. Do not pick him. That's it, just don't. I don't care if I put him on this list. I did because some people like to play him, and he's good at doing some things, but he's bad most of the time, so don't pick him. I don't care if you can one-shot a carry late game, what else do you do? And that's the problem. Aphrodite can keep one of your teammates safe. It's very good if you've got an aggressive jungler or an aggressive support. She's very helpful for that, gives them some support. She can heal, but she can only do one target at a time, protect a target at a time. She's not good at initiating and isolating targets herself. So she's actually very reliant upon her team, typically, to do what she's good at. And that's not great. As a solo laner, you don't want to be relying on your team to do things. They should be relying on you to do your job, typically, as a solo laner. Because you don't want to be in a situation where you have to be bailed out by your team. You're the big, tanky, aggressive initiator. it's a bad thing when you're the solo laner and you can't do that. Because most comps are not going to be able to support you not being able to play as a disruptor and an aggressive initiator. And anyway, there you go. That's matchups and team synergy for most solo laners that you would be considering picking. So there you go, guys. Part 3 of this solo lane guide. I hope you guys have enjoyed it so far. Anyway, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this part 3 to the solo lane guide. Leave a comment down below if you want. As always, check the helpful links down in the description. And I'll see you guys later for some more Smite. Have a good one.